Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. This season, it's all grit. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we get you ready for the Detroit Lions training camp. We'll talk about the players we have an eye on, the position group battles to focus on, and any other Detroit Lions or NFL-related topics that are relevant to what's going on right now. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
This is James Williams, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Today, I'm joined by the usual James Cook, senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. You can also hear him on his podcast, The Get Around, taking a summer break, but that drops on Mondays. That will be starting back up in the fall. James, great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
And hopefully we'll be hearing from Coach Angers later in the show as well. So we'll see if we can get him on the line, a little scheduling thing going on there, but hopefully we get some of his insights as well. Well, let's start with topic number one, training camp tickets. Training camp. Can you go see it? Yes, we all know you can go as a fan to see it. It's starting real soon. Rookies are reporting on the 20th, veterans on the 23rd, and then the 24th is the first day they've got media access, so things are going to get really busy really quick. Public practices, there are 9 of them in total. The first one open to the public is July 27th. Those are for the Lions loyal members. Those sold out very quickly, and when I say sell out, they're free. We know that, but you have to get the tickets. There were 3 dates that already were given out. I believe all 3 are gone. I know 2 of those dates were gone within hours of them releasing it. The next ticket release date is July 16th. I believe it's a 10 a.m. release. And so if you're interested, I would highly recommend you get on there right when they get released. There's like 6 more dates, and they all sold out last year. I would expect the exact same this year. James, any thoughts on the training camp experience, people going down there? Any suggestions for that?
No, I've never gone myself, so I would be interested to see what people who have gone say about going to training camp. If any of the viewers or anything want to comment on what they've done, hacks for going in, getting yourself prepared and all that stuff like that. I'd be kind of interested in hearing that.
Yeah, please. If you've gone, had experiences, share them. Coach Angers and I went to training camp last year. It was a phenomenal experience. I would say get there early, just that way you're not rushed and you're able to get up there. Early on, they let you take some pictures and some photos, video, just for the early part. Then they have like a no video policy. If you stay around afterwards, some players do sign autographs. It's a fun event, and just another way to kind of see the players when they don't have quite so much pressure on them as they do on a game day situation. Last year, we were lucky. We got to see a joint practice when another team is in town and they practice together. Looking over that preseason schedule, James, the Lions are only going to have one joint practice. That's going to be with the Giants, and that's a road game. So that will be out in the New York area. They're home for Pittsburgh, and then on the road for Kansas City. No joint practices with either of those two. So that's kind of what the schedule's looking like right there. James, we got some news that just came out today that's pretty exciting about a very, very highly held and esteemed wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. Could you tell the listeners what's going on with that?
Yeah, well, Calvin Johnson, who I'm going to assume everybody here is familiar with, is going to be inducted into the Pride of the Lions, which is basically the Lions Ring of Honor in the stadium. That's going to be the Monday night game against Seattle on September 30th. So add a little bit more to a nationally televised game. That should be a pretty good one. The Lions haven't had very good history against Seattle the last few years, so maybe they're trying to do that night to get the team fired up a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe they can have a repeat of last year when Lomas Brown was inducted to the Pride of the Lions on Monday night, I think against the Raiders. And so that is exciting, very, very well-deserved, and will be fun to watch. And hopefully they'll show a little bit of it during the broadcast for the people who can't get down there. I know I won't be able to make it to that game, but it's very exciting that Calvin Johnson is going to join the Pride of the Lions. So that's awesome news there. All right, well, let's transition into our first topic. We want to talk about the players that we think are going to take a step forward this year, some increased production. And James, I recently spoke with Jahmyr Gibbs and talked to him about him entering his second year. Here's a little bit of that conversation. What is life like for you going into your second season versus a rookie?
Much more, calm. I'm pretty sure, when you come in as a rookie, you're kind of nervous. You don't know what to expect. So, second year coming in, I'm pretty, head straight on. I know what I want to do.
So, James, Jahmyr talked about how much more prepared he is going in to his second year. And I think the guys on the list that are the easiest to pick to say we think are going to make the big improvements are the second year players, because those are the people who traditionally have gone through the biggest transition from college to the NFL, a whole offseason, now NFL. We saw Jahmyr Gibbs last year come in slow, then accelerate as the season went on, which is not uncommon. What are you expecting out of Jahmyr Gibbs?
I expect a little bit, a little uptick in usage, and maybe a little bit different usage, maybe a little bit more, putting him in the backfield and motioning him out as more of a kind of a pure slot receiver, trying to get that mismatch of maybe you get him on a linebacker in some space there. But otherwise, I think it'll be the same, pretty similar to what you saw the second half of last season as far as usage. David Montgomery is still going to get a pretty decent workload because he's so dependable. He doesn't fumble. He's good at pass protection. He just does everything well. They don't throw to him a lot, but when they do, he's pretty decent at that as well. I'd really love the Lions running back combination and the guys that they have behind him to add a little bit to that as well. So,
yeah, and I'm not thinking that just you're going to see bigger stats by Gibbs. There's a good chance those stats will come along with that usage, but I think that usage is going to be the big part. We might see more situations of Gibbs and Montgomery on the field at the same time just because of their abilities and what they add to the dynamic of that offense when they're both out there.
Yeah, because if nothing else, Ben Johnson has shown us that he is very creative and that he will take and he will adapt his plays to the players that he has and emphasize their strengths in addition to just being an offensive coordinator who comes up with some sweet plays and then tries to pigeonhole players into it. He does such a great job at merging the two, coming up with great plays and ones that take care of the strengths of their players and emphasize the strengths of the players that he has on the roster.
Now, is there another player or two? Who's the next player on your list that you're like, hey, this person, I see some increased production and maybe a little bit of progress from last year to this year?
I have a pretty long list. The number one on that list is Jameson Williams. Not a second year guy, a third year guy, but I almost like a second year guy in that he missed time with the suspension, missed time his rookie year with injuries. So I kind of consider him a second year guy rather than a third, really. And when you look at it, and I expect to see that jump out of him in production, in usage. And I'm pretty sure you're along the same vein on that thought.
I am. I spoke with Jameson this weekend, and he talked about how having that increased role and increased production as the season went on last year really helped impact him getting ready for this upcoming training camp and season. And I tell you, he had some great quotes when I asked him about that. He said, it impacted him a lot and it sets him up for more and more of what's coming, and he's prepared for what's coming. And what's coming, well, he said he wants to score touchdowns and win football games. And you know what? If that's what's coming, every Detroit Lions fan's excited. And I agree with you, James. I think you're going to see a big step forward from him for a variety of reasons, right? You talked about already the fact that he's had that full off season to work with the Lions after coming off that season. And we know there's a little bit difference depth-wise in the receiver room, and so there's going to be some adjustments there. Who else do you have, James?
Well, the guy who's not a second year guy in the league, but a second year guy in the Lions system would be Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think you'll see him on the field more and playing more. I think that unless some other things happen, unless somebody comes out of the woodwork that we're not expecting, that I think the DPJ is your number 3 receiver, and that he'll get a lot of that Josh Reynolds work. So I think you'll see a lot more of him this season. But Green could be that guy too. You never know. I think you'll see him. If you don't see anything out of Jamison Williams, maybe you see a lot more of Green. If he hasn't progressed like people hope. Although I don't think that's going to necessarily be the case either.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's like saying on that offensive side of the ball, I was thinking the same thing with Donovan Peoples-Jones having the whole offseason. This year, we're going to see what Donovan Peoples-Jones can do for this offense. And if he does well, he could be here for a good while. And if he doesn't find that right fit, it might be telling. He's only on a 1-year deal, but I think this year sets him up for success as well. On the offensive side of the ball, those are the guys I really see. Antoine Green, you're right. This is going to be a big year for him. He needs to progress going forward. We knew that they were hoping he would be ready in year 2, and this is where we are. So that'll be a good one to keep an eye on. Is there anybody else on the offense that you kind of have an eye on?
James Mitchell. I think this is kind of a little bit of a make or break year for him, and he's got to come on. I mean, he's pretty firmly buried at the third tight end, but they've used him in some pretty high leverage situations in the last year or so, and so they have some confidence in him, and he just needs to kind of step up with a few more of those situations. So he's somebody who I think could take that another step, and if they do, then I mean the Lions have one of the best tight end rooms in the NFL.
Yeah, I hope he does, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit more when we get into the position battles. The other guy I've got on offense, I'm hoping Colby Sorsdal takes a step forward on the offensive line and steps into a very dependable reserve role because you always need guys that can come in from time to time.
Yeah, I can see him. Yeah, I think there'll be an interesting battle, and we'll kind of maybe come back to this a little bit later in the position battles part. But I think you'll see several guys that they're going to maybe try to use as that sixth lineman / blocking tight end, like the Dan Skipper role. It's not Skipper's automatically this year. He's going to have to fight some people off, and I think Sorsdal is one of those guys.
All right, well, let's move over to defense then. All right, anybody you're looking at and thinking they're going to take a step forward this year, you're excited to see growth out of that player?
Basically anyone who didn't start last year and is back. And even one starter. I think Lee McNeil, I think, can still take another step and has put himself into that. I mean, he transformed his body and started to become more of a pass rusher last year, but that's a process. That's not an overnight thing. And I think you'll see that to pay off even more this year, and especially with somebody like DJ Reader next to him. So Ali McNeil, I think, is somebody who takes a step up and is even better than last year. And then you've got Kaminsky, Onwuzurike, Broderick Martin, and Josh Paschal, who all four of those have immense talent and will get the opportunity to at least be part of that rotation. Probably not starters, but at least chance to be that rotation in the defensive line. And Aaron Glenn likes to use lots of defensive linemen. So I could see all four or any of those four guys taking a step forward, and it would be great if all four did, obviously.
Yeah, that defensive line rotation is going to look very different from last year. We don't have Benito Jones. We don't have Isaiah Buggs, right? Okwaras are gone.
Both Okwaras are gone, yeah.
So it's going to be very different. There's a lot of opportunity for people to step up. Josh Paschal's a prime candidate for that. Levi Onwuzurike coming back healthy, starting healthy is a big step forward for him. And I agree with you. Aleem McNeil, for as well as he's done, you feel like there's a chance he has one more level to get to yet. And if he gets there with some of those new additions, that could be really interesting.
And Aleem is basically in a contract year. So that's always a thing.
That does often play a part for sure. So let's move back to the linebacking core. The easy person here is to say Jack Campbell. He was a rookie last year, and he wasn't the main starter, but he could become the starter this year, or it could just be a rotation, and it might not be a starter. It might not necessarily be the same two starters all the time, but they're probably running the nickel formation. But Campbell's the guy you think you'll see the most improvement from or the most growth from. Any other thoughts on the linebacking core or on Campbell?
Yeah, and I think you could see more three linebacker formations this year too. I think the part of the reason why they played the nickel all the time is because they knew those DBs needed an extra guy back there last year. With the competition that they have there this year, maybe you don't need an extra DB all the time to help those corners out. You've got 4 legit NFL corners who are all incredibly talented. So you might see more, I think, of the 3 linebacker looks. So where you'll see Anzalone, Campbell, and Barnes all on the field at the same time, with maybe with a little bit of Rodrigo too. And then and some Jalen Reeves-Maybin too. I mean, he's a good covered linebacker. So having him as a 3rd linebacker is almost like a nickel type of play. But yeah, I think Barnes can still be another guy who can take a step forward. We've seen him improve every year, and this is a big year for him too, because he'll be a free agent after this year. And Campbell, yeah, is the obvious. Like, Campbell's got to take that job. He's got to take that starting job this year and make it his. And everything so far from OTAs and everything has pointed in that direction. So that's good. But you want to see him actually do it and take that job from Barnes. Don't leave any question, and just go ahead and do it and prove that he should have been the number 18 pick in the draft. And just take it.
All right, well, let's move to the secondary, and we're going to start first with exclusively with defensive backs. And this is a tough one to say who's going to take a step forward, because we've got a lot of new pieces here. Carlton Davis III is new. Terrion Arnold is new. Amik Robertson, Enos Rakestraw are all new. The guy's coming back. You got Emmanuel Mosley. Well, if he's healthy and he's on the field, you can say he's taken a step forward. Sure. Kindle Vildor is back in a depth role, and he could take a step forward after a whole year with the Lions offseason and working on more scheme things. But I don't know if there's a candidate here that I'm looking at and thinking anywhere in the defensive back room that someone's going to take a step forward. And I'm moving Brian Branch to safety for this conversation. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on defensive backs?
Yeah, before they take a step forward, they got to figure out who's in the front at that position group, I think. And that hasn't totally been settled. That's going to be, and we're going to get to it probably later, a position battle. That's going to be one of the big position battles, I think, this year for the Lions is the corner group. I think that if you want to move to safety and talk about Brian Branch a little bit, I think that the other safeties, Kirby Joseph, maybe even a little Brandon Joseph, if he makes the team, he's looked good. And then if Melifonwu can at least keep doing what he did last year, if not get better, also another contract year guy. And then, CJ Moore is another safety who, he's going to take a step forward because last year he wasn't on the roster because he, did some illegal things, with betting. It's easy for him to take a step forward because last year he wasn't even at the back of the class.
Right. Well, the safety position is really intriguing because the safety position wasn't bad last year, and there's room for growth because Kirby Joseph has room to get better. And Ifeatu Melifonwu had his best stretch as a Detroit Lion and as an NFL player last year. And if he could do that consistently, and then we already know how well Brian Branch did last year, there's a good chance they're going to move him to safety. And again, they could have sub packages where he's at nickelback and then back to safety. But each of those guys has a chance to take a step forward and make the back part of the secondary that much better. And that also will help take a little bit of pressure off the secondary as far as the defensive backs go. So anybody on special teams you want to talk about, or you want to get right into position battles?
The special teams is kind of a position battle, I think.
Well, then let's start position battles with special teams, and then we'll go from there. Special teams, position battle, Michael Badgley, Jake Bates. They are the 2 kickers on the roster. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it totally depends on how this works out in training camp, I think. I don't think that either one of them has. Bates is the hot name, but Badgley's the incumbent. And so I don't think that either of them goes into training camp with a leg up on the other one, no pun intended. I think it's just going to be a straight up battle. Who does better in training camp and preseason wins this job, and we'll probably see a lot of them in pretty evenly split workload in the preseason games to determine that.
In a previous episode, I had Jeremy Reisman on as a guest, and I laid out like the revolving door of kickers for like the last 3 years with the Lions. You and I have talked about this ad nauseum as well, James. Mm-hmm. Folks, if you want to see who's come and gone and what these stats are, check out that previous episode. Michael Badgley has actually done a lot better than a lot of people realize he's done, and especially if you look at his historical accuracy. So for me, yeah, I want the best guy to win. I want whoever's going to be best for the team to win. You know, in the past, I thought it was going to be Riley Patterson. I thought he was the answer, and it didn't work out. And whoever it is, I hope that they can just kind of settle into that position. And what I mean by that is they own it, they command it like Matt Prater did, like Eddie Murray did. And oh my gosh, if they could
Jason
be even,
Hansen.
you know, I don't want to put them on the Hansen level because that's a lot to try to live up to. But even if they get to be Eddie Murray, Matt Prater level for consistency, you know, and again, if you look at the numbers, they might surprise you a little bit as far as how consistent some of those guys were. But you always felt confident with those guys. All right, let's move on from special teams and position battles, and let's go right back to the offense. We'll look at position battles there. Quarterback, we know it's Jared Goff. Backup, attendant hooker. I don't really see any position battles going on with quarterback. You have any thoughts?
No, that's pretty well established. Hooker could be another guy that you could have that we could have talked about in the taking a step forward, but any step forward for him, any step is a step forward for him after not really playing much last year. So yeah, I think probably you'll see Sudfeld on the practice squad, you know, with the rules on that being a little bit different this year and the emergency quarterbacks. So I think that the Lions will probably just roster 2 quarterbacks, and probably most NFL teams I think will, unless they think they have a really good third quarterback that's a developmental one that they're worried about getting poached.
That makes sense. All right, let's go to running back then. I think this is going to be an interesting one. Obviously, there's no real discussion with David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. They're a 1A, 1B combo. But where it gets really interesting is the rest of the backfield. There's not currently a fullback on the roster. And, you know, Coach Campbell was asked about it earlier this summer, and he said if the right guy was there and if it made sense, they would bring that person in. But because it hasn't happened yet, it makes you think they might not do that, which means there's going to be an extra roster spot, whether that's in the running back position or the tight end or where they go. But the Lions have Craig Reynolds. He's currently probably the number 3 guy on the depth chart. But you also have Sione Vaki, who was drafted, and you have Zonovan Knight back, who we picked up last year. And I'm really excited about all 3 of those guys. I think it's going to be a really good competition for the number 3 and 4 spot. And I'm thinking right now we're going to keep 4 running backs. I don't know about a fifth guy, depending who it is, could maybe be a practice squad guy. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as of right now in my 53-man roster that I've done, I have them keeping 4. With that 4th being either Reynolds or Knight. You know, Vaki's going to make the team. I think that's pretty established. And then part of that depends on also, you know, who they want as the kick returner. Is it going to be Vaki or Knight or Khalif Raymond? I think is pretty well suited for that. Or do they want to keep Raymond a little more healthy for playing wide receiver? You know, because he's not the biggest guy, but skill wise, he's perfect for the new kickoff rules. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what that position battle is for the kick return duties.
Yeah, so well, let's slide over to wide receivers then. Again, the running back position, I agree. Sione Vaki is on the team for sure. Zonovan and Craig will be going for that number 4 spot. And again, I love the depth and I love the potential out of all those guys. We already know Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams and Khalif Raymond are the top 3 guys. And Raymond's a guy that, you know, we don't even talk about too much. He kind of sneaks up on you, and he's quick and he's got some speed, and you know, he might sneak up on some other teams this year as they're focused on all these other people.
Mm-hmm.
So don't sleep on Khalif Raymond.
He sneaks up on a lot of defensive backs too.
He does. But we got to look a little deeper than those top 3 because we know that depth is important. We already kind of talked about Donovan Peoples-Jones, hoping he takes a step forward. Maybe Antoine Green. Traquan Smith came over. He was with the Saints at one point. You have Maurice Alexander, Tom Kennedy, Darius Fountain, Isaiah Williams. You know, I'm interested to see mostly between Donovan Peoples-Jones and Antoine Green, and then maybe how Isaiah Williams fits into this calculation as well. Those are the 3 guys I'm watching the most for the receivers to see who's going to step up. How about you?
Yeah, I think that those top 5 guys are fairly safe. I think Green would have to really kind of play his way off the roster almost. as the fifth guy. And then I think it's Isaiah Williams has probably got the inside track, I would say, for the sixth spot. If they go with 6 wide receivers, which I think they can, depending on how they want to structure the roster. I think they can keep a 6th wide receiver, and that totally all their bases are covered at wide receiver, and with return guys who can do return stuff during games. So because Williams is a guy who I think could also handle returns if needed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The 4 and 5 guys also, DPJ and Antoine Green, both have that size we've talked about in past episodes that St. Brown, Williams, and Raymond don't have. So it makes them a different type of a receiver, which in certain situations could be very beneficial. So again, it's going to take something from somebody else to really unseat one of them, or for one of those guys to not do what we're expecting. So then let's move over to tight ends. We know Sam Laporta is tight end 1. Brock Wright with that new contract, that just makes him tight end 2. James Mitchell is a guy that some people have wondered if we're going to see more from. We thought we'd see an elevation from, and Shane Zylstra was injured last year. Those two have to be in a really good battle, I think, for the number 3 tight end position.
Yeah, I think so. I think that those three are pretty well established there. I think Shane Zylstra, maybe if the Lions keep 4 tight ends, or maybe make him into a fullback type, although blocking wasn't necessarily what he was best known for. But you could maybe keep an extra tight end and use those guys as kind of an amalgam to play some fullback on the handful of plays a season where the Lions use a fullback. And then you've got Parker Hesse, who's the veteran guy from Iowa, another Iowa guy who's known more for his blocking. That's probably right there with Zylstra for the 4th one, depending on whether you want a blocker or a receiver. And both of those guys are probably practice squad candidates too, I would say.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's going to be really interesting. I don't want to underrate what Shane Zylstra can do. And so I'm excited to see him come back. I'm looking forward to it. And I feel really good about our tight end room, like the whole room from top to bottom. I think it's going to be a strong room. And let's move over to offensive line then. We know the top 5, the 4 returning starters plus Kevin Zeitler. We already talked about Colby Sorsdal as a guy we think will take a big step forward. We've got Coyote Awashika, who took a number of snaps last year and filled in well. We've got some new guys that are coming in. Any thoughts on any of the battles that you're looking at right here? You kind of alluded to one earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the starters are established outside of injury. We know who the 5 starters are. Yeah, it's the backup linemen. It's whether do they keep 8 linemen? Do they go 9? And so I think it's between Manu, Sorsdal, Mahogany, and then maybe a little bit on the outside looking in, unless they keep 9 guys, is Skipper Awashika, and the center that was undrafted free agent from Florida. I think he is somebody who could sneak in there, and I think he's probably going to at least make the practice squad so that they have somebody who can play center as a full-time center type in case of an injury.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That way you're not always going to have to move Graham over there, and it gives you another option in there. Any other thoughts on the offense before we move over to the defense?
No, I think we're pretty good there.
Okay. Defensive line, I think we kind of know who the 4 starters are penciled in to be, which would be Hutchinson, McNeil, DJ Reader, and Marcus Davenport. Now, Reader's coming off an injury, so we're going to have to see how well he progresses and how quickly, but he is expected to be ready to go for the season. But we already talked about it. The backup roles are going to be so different. John Kaminsky is there, but Isaiah Buggs, Benito Jones, the Okwara brothers are gone. So you've got some new spots for guys who are either new to the team or were lower on the chart and either battled injury like Levi and Pascal. I'm really looking forward to seeing what those guys can do healthy. And can Broderick Martin, he falls into that same category as Colby Sorsdal. Can he take a step forward this year? And can he be a rotational player that contributes? I'm looking at Broderick Martin, the guy. I think that's the guy I want to see the most out of in training camp.
Yeah, I think he's a very interesting one. I think he looked at what Aleem McNeil did last year, with slimming down a little bit, getting, if not losing weight, but just bulking up muscle wise and speed wise. And he seems to have really transformed himself in the off season and gotten I think he's still a nose tackle. He's not doing it like with Nee McNeil to play the three technique and be a pass rushing defensive end, or defensive tackle. I mean, but I think that the renewed determination, I guess, from him. He's been in the NFL for a year. He's had to make a big jump from the college that he came from, and he saw what that's going to take, and he's, at least so far, seems to have taken it. So we know he's talented. We know that Holmes likes him, traded up for him in the end of the third round. He's somebody that I think really can take a step up, and if he does, then that whole defensive line gets even more dangerous.
It does. They were so good at stopping the run last year. The goal was to try and get a better pass rush, a little bit more pressure and containment on the quarterback. And
Mhm.
there is definitely room for improvement with that. And of course, if we see some growth from those guys, that will help the linebacking core.
And if you see that Reader's not ready for the beginning of the season, or if they're just even a little hesitant on maybe not rushing him back or anything like that, you may see a lot of Broderick Martin in the first couple weeks of the season.
Yeah, excellent point there. So let's go to the linebacker position. We talked about Jack Campbell as our candidate for, with the most growth, but we also have some guys who are already doing pretty well with Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes. We didn't even mention Malcolm Rodriguez, and you've got Jalen Reeves-Maben. I think the top 5 linebackers on this team are pretty set. I think it's going to be, tendencies, packages, formations, depending on who's on the field is between these guys, especially if Campbell takes a step forward. They're hoping by him taking a step forward, that elevates the entire room.
Yeah, I think so. And they've got some other guys in there competing for some roster spots, but I just don't know that there's roster spots to be had. They picked up the veteran guy, Ben Neiman from Iowa. They picked up Mitchell Agude, the rookie free agent, basically, on somebody else's practice squad last year. Those are guys that are kind of on the outside looking in, but maybe either via injury or, like you said, with no Jason Kabinda, there's one extra roster spot, and they could just be sitting there dangling that one roster spot in front of everybody who's number 50 to 70 on that team, and just saying, "Hey, this is here to take."
We saw Malcolm Rodriguez fill in at fullback last year. And so, that room is pretty exciting to watch. Again, I think it's just going to be based on formations and whatnot as to who's there. But hopefully Campbell does take that step forward. And you're right, we might keep a number 6 guy. And that number 6 guy might be, I think a good chance is a practice squad linebacker that we can pull up.
Oh, yeah, they're for sure. They'll keep at least one linebacker on the practice squad, I think.
All right, so now let's move to the secondary, and we'll start with the cornerback position. And again, this is the one that's got the most new parts. Carlton Davis III and Terrion Arnold are the projected starters at this point based on draft spot and trade spot, with Amik Robertson maybe being your nickel back, or maybe it's Enos Rakestraw. We've got Emmanuel Mosley coming back from injury. We've got Stephen Gilmore. We've got Kindle Vildor. So all these guys, I guess what I'm looking to see, I want to see Carlton Davis be the guy we think he is. Because I think the trade for Carlton Davis is actually going to be a much bigger deal than most people realize. Because look at the experience in our secondary. It's very young with a lot of these guys. And Carlton Davis has the experience. He's a veteran. I think it's coming off his 4th year, I believe. And so he's been around for a little bit, and that's going to provide some great leadership. He was a 2018 draft pick. So I think if he fits in the way the Lions are expecting him to, that's going to be big. Terrion Arnold, hoping he takes command of that other starting spot like we expect him to, and nails that down, and those are your top 2 starting defensive backs. What are your thoughts on those guys and then the depth positions?
Yeah, they're in a really nice position as far as the corners, in that they have so many guys to choose from. They have veteran guys in Davis and Mosley and Amik Robertson, who's another guy who's been in the NFL for a while and has had starting experience. And then you've got your top 2 picks from last year, so you've got a lot of youth and a lot of potential there. And if they decide that those young guys aren't ready by next season, you just extend Carlton Davis for a year or 2 at probably around the same what he's getting paid now. So it's not going to really cripple you on the cap or anything. but he's making starting NFL corner money. So, I think that the cornerback room is in maybe the best shape of almost any position group, and that's saying something.
Yeah, last year I was really optimistic about the defensive back room, and then a few things went sideways, and it didn't work out as expected. So I'm hoping that this year is what I was hoping last year was going to be, but this year is what it actually is, which is much improved through training camp. I just want to see Emmanuel Mosley start becoming that player we thought he was going to be when we got him, and see if he can be healthy and take that step forward and become a if not the number 3 guy. He could push for a number 2, but be a very good number 3. That would make me feel really good about it. And then just seeing how the pieces fit together, because it's very wide open. The roles are not defined in this spot in general. With the nickelback, is Rakestraw going to get moved there, or will he stay on the outside? Amik Robertson plays more outside than nickelback. What are they going to do with him? A lot of new pieces, and that's exciting, but it also means you got to figure out what's going to work, and that can take some time.
Yeah, that is the one thing is, the corners got to work together and communicate. When you're playing zone coverages, there's so much communication. So that could be why you see more man coverage, is because they could just leave these guys on an island and just say, you have him, and you have him. And that's all we got to do. Nobody has to communicate if you do your job and cover your guy.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we know the Lions' tendency is they want to play more man. They've gone and gotten guys for that. Moving to the safety position, we talked about the guys. We talked about everybody pretty much and wanted them to take a step forward. It's going to be interesting because unless they go with a 3 safety formation, Branch, Joseph, and Melifonwu, one of them will not be the starter. So that will be a real interesting battle to watch to see which 2 out of those 3 guys get named starters if in fact they're moving Branch out of the nickel and back to the safety spot.
Mm-hmm. You could see Melifonwu maybe play there a little bit more. So where they bring the nickel guy from time to time on essentially safety blitzes, which they did a little bit more in the second half of last season. You could just see all kinds of stuff. I mean, the safety, you don't even know, aside from Kirby Joseph, you're not sure who's starting where.
Right, you really don't.
And from one of the news things that we got during the offseason here recently is that Kirby Joseph was playing hurt all last year and should be better this season. So I think as much as anything, it's like basically the 4th safety position is where your battle is going to be between CJ Moore and Brandon Joseph, or do they bring in a vet?
Well, you just said what I'm thinking right there, which is, last year the Lions, they made a trade early in training camp for a wide receiver, right? They actually cut Michael Badgley to make room for Denzel Mims. Now, Mims didn't stick, Badgley came back, but if there's one spot I would want them to maybe consider bringing somebody in, it would be the safety position, strictly for someone who's got a little bit more experience there to add to the room. Even if they're not a starter, they don't have to be a starter, but someone that's got a little bit more experience. The name that probably comes to most Lions fans' names is Quandre Diggs, just because he's got the experience. They've got the familiarity with his name. They know his style of play. And again, we're not necessarily looking for someone to be the starter. We've got a starter. We've got multiple starters, but someone that can help teach the room and help out on the field as well.
Yeah, and they're going to have to be somebody that they bring in and say, hey, are you willing to play special teams? Is Quandre Diggs willing to play special teams? Because I don't think he has for years in Seattle. So that's going to be a thing. Diggs is another guy I would like to see. It's just the experience, the familiarity with Detroit. He seems to have an affinity for Detroit as well. And other guys that they could bring back if they decide to would be Tracy Campbell still out, or Tracy Walker is still out there. And then Curse as a guy who's a free agent and could be very cheap, a guy that played for them a couple years ago that they had at safety. And, he's, a little bit older, but still, I mean, you're bringing somebody in as a cheap 4th veteran safety. I mean, that's kind of what you want. And he can play special teams.
Yeah, so it's not like it's Diggs or Bus. That's just a name that a lot of people hear and think about. But again, I like the idea. You brought up another couple guys that would be very good or get me excited if they brought one of those guys to the roster for some depth. Again, though, It depends where all these pieces move and whatnot. All right, Coach, really appreciate that we're able to connect. You're having a great day out on the boat. That's amazing. James and I just got done talking about players we thought are going to make a step forward this year. We went through a good number of them. Is there one or two players in your mind that you are expecting or hoping to see take a big step forward this year?
Well, I think you're two big step forwards. I mean, I'm sure you guys agree with the J-Mo, of course. I think he's the one that's just got to rise above the occasion and make some big plays for us. Campbell's the other one. I think Campbell worked on his pass coverage abilities. He's long, he's fast, he's big, he's a good run stopper. You take those two just to add to what we've had in the free agent market, things like that. It's going to be a huge change. So I think those are the two that should take the biggest leaps. And I think Pascal is the DN. He finished the year pretty strong, and I think he'll end up doing some good things for us too. I'm sure they worked on his pass pass rushing ability. Trying to get more sacks and stuff like that. So we could bring up Houston. Houston. Hopefully he's as good as he was in 2022.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up James Houston because James and I didn't talk about him much, if at all. And he's a guy that if he does take a step forward, that's one more great piece to this defense that could just help put us at a different level. Now, Coach, another thing we talked about here was position battles, right? Not just guys taking a step forward, but hey, who's going to win out the positions? And one I really want your insights on is the defensive line, because James and I talked about all the guys that are gone. We got new faces in. We got spaces for guys to elevate. What are you looking for from the defensive line players? And are there any guys you're hoping are going to, win out a spot?
Again, I brought up Houston, but let's look at the DN position. We brought in Davenport, we got Pascal, we got the commish, we got Houston, and we got Betts, the kid from the Canadian League. And and again, Houston may turn into be an outside linebacker concept. But those are big, on the DN spot. How are they going to fit? Is Betts, the kid from the Canadian League, going to be able to do what he did? Is he going to be somebody like a James Houston that can be a special rusher for us? Just a specialty pass rushing downs situations. Kaminsky, I keep reading stuff about he better have a great camp. And, and I'm, he's my favorite. That I talk about him all the time. He's not the flash player, the splash player, the guy that you hear, but he just gets the job done. So, Davenport, coming off that injury is going to be a big one. If he can get back to his rookie year, his second year with that, he just had a great year. And, if he can get back to half of that, it's a plus for us on the defensive side of the ball.
Any other position battles that you've got your eye on that you are focused on? You want to see who's going to take it?
And you got Mitchell Aguda too. That I don't know if you guys mentioned him. He's another one that we quietly took him off the waiver wire. He was with University of Miami, and then he played with the Dolphins last year. It was an undrafted rookie, and then didn't make the squad. But he's got a ton of intangibles, and I think when you look at that. And then you brought Betts in, from the CFL. Those are guys that they're looking at possibly to back up Hutch, and maybe we can give Hutch a rest or two. Even though Max Crosby never comes off the field, I think Hutch wants to be just like him. So I think those are some some things that we look at. And then if you look at the D line, we're talking about the D line. Levi is still out there. Broderick Martin, I can't wait to see what he does in camp after him going on the McNeil diet, it looks like. And then the kid from LSU
Mekhi
Wingo, geez, man, thank you. He does some things. We still got Paco. I think the biggest thing is I hope and pray that Davenport goes back to where he's going to be, and then all the younger guys that are learning positions and coming in, and the rookies and the free agents that we picked up can help with those needs and help put the pressure on the back until our great defensive backfield, which is going to be good. I think it's going to be one of the best, possibly not this year, but in the years to come, with the young guys, give them some time to learn the coverage concept. As long as they're putting pressure, if a quarterback's on his back, he can't throw the ball. And I think that's what the D line. I think that's kind of what they did, by bringing Reeder in and Davenport, and then some of these free agents. So I think it's gonna be a lot of fun to see how training camp falls out, Matt. And you and I talked about it on the last cut where somebody's gonna get cut that we liked, and it's sad that he's got to go. But oh my God, are we deep in talent? Yeah, I think the D line one. I think the D line is the biggest one.
Yeah, and that's the one I wanted to hear from you the most on. Awesome, Coach. Thanks so much for making the time in this beautiful weather to join the show today.
Hey, anytime we can talk Lions.
Obviously, with training camp, goal number one, get out as healthy as possible. That's the big thing for training camp here. James, any final thoughts on training camp, the battles, anything like that we haven't touched on?
I think the other battle is not a specific position battle, and it's Malcolm Rodriguez versus the depth everywhere else. Like, what are they going to do to find a way to get him on the field? Are they going to play him more at linebacker? Are they going to play him at fullback? Is it going to be, special teams? They're going to find some other way to get him in the game. Dan Campbell loves the guy, so he's going to make every effort he can to try to get him on the field when he can. So that's going to be something that might be an interesting training camp angle is, where do we go with Rodrigo? Because we want him on the field, but we've upgraded so many places. Where can we get him?
Yeah, that makes sense, because that is the guy that a lot of people love. They love everything about him. It's like, where can he fit in and what roles? And he might be that jack of all trades guy where he fills in a little bit here, there, and special teams. So that'll be fun to keep an eye on. And who knows, maybe with a new kickoff thing, he'll have a really big role there that's different than before, because that whole kickoff is going to be a very unique thing to watch unfold. And I think that might be the most exciting thing about preseason. Can't wait to watch that Hall of Fame game.
Yeah. The kickoff thing is going to change so much more than people realize. The back half dozen spots on your roster is not necessarily going to be filled by, we need a fourth safety. It's going to be, we need an extra dude for this kickoff return formation. And Rodriguez is, I think, perfect for this new, you're going to not necessarily want defensive linemen as much in this. You're going to want linebackers who can still engage with the guy and be like a lineman, in that they can just kind of create a point that nobody goes and everything, but still be able to disengage. And Rodrigo, he will throw his body around recklessly. And I think that's what you're going to need, at least a couple of guys on that special teams unit to do.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, wrapping up training camp talk, I want to mention the Netflix show Receiver. I think you've been living under a rock is about the only way you haven't heard about it. Doesn't mean everyone's had time to watch it, but if you haven't, do yourself a favor, watch it. If you thought Amon-Ra St. Brown was tough before, which I think most of us did, you are going to have an appreciation on an entirely different level after watching this. And it's a lot of fun. Unfortunately, there is the San Francisco game in there. The good news is they don't have the Dallas one in there. But episode 1, pretty heavy with St. Brown. Episode 2 doesn't have him in it, I don't think, at all. So if you're mostly just looking for the Lions side, you could probably skip episode 2. But it's a great watch. It's a lot of fun. And it's some great content when there's not a lot out there. It'd be a great thing to do to lead up to training camp. James, thanks so much for being here. Awesome talking Lions with you as usual.
Always great to be here. Always great to talk Lions.
All right. And folks, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit that like button. And while you're at it, tell your friends about the show, and please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. Until next time, stay gritty, my friends.